Good morning, everyone. Your Sunday weather briefing for this June 2nd. I would not consider there to be any sort of major changes in the U.S. forecast versus what I presented from back on Friday morning. There's my temperature and rainfall outlooks for the next couple of weeks. Again, emphasizing with regards to temperatures, we're not seeing this battle zone of air masses in the middle of the country that dominated so much of the weather pattern for the month of May. With that in mind, we're not going to be seeing these real stormy and real heavy periods of rainfall coming up in the middle of the country. But at the same time, it's clearly not a dry forecast either. You can still see there some above normal rainfall in the 6 to 10 day period, and at least near normal rainfall for the 11 to 15 day time frame. QPF discussion for the 1 to 5 day period. I do not have any major disagreements with this forecast. Corn Belt is generally dry for today. Starting to see some scattered rains there, though, on Tuesday, with better rains then falling in the Corn Belt for the Wednesday, Thursday time frame. It certainly does look like the Interstate 80 corridor is going to be the dividing line between significant and heavy rains to the south of there and lighter rains to the north of there. Some rain is going to be falling in every day during this period in the hardware winter wheat belt to account for the substantial rains that are shown in this map there. Still another 3 to 4 days of dry weather for the mid-south before they see rainfall on Thursday and beyond. Rainfall looks to remain minimal in this period in the northern plains. Probably some areas there getting no rain at all. Then for the day 6 to 7 time frame, GFS probably the model of choice with this forecast, but the European model is not exceptionally different. Rains for the Friday, Saturday time frame is going to continue in the southeastern Corn Belt again, mainly to the south of Interstate 80, while areas to the north of there continue to see limited rainfall, maybe even getting some drier conditions into the western Corn Belt and plain states during this time frame. Note that substantial rains will continue to fall in the Friday, Saturday time frame in the mid-south and start to get into the southeast during that period as well. As far as weekend weather is concerned, here's your 48-hour radar estimated precipitation through early in the day on this Sunday. Versus my own expectations from back on Friday morning, I would consider rainfall this weekend in the Corn Belt to be heavier than expected, but at the same time, what we would call coverage to be less than expected. You can see in this map that there were very large areas of the Corn Belt that during the last 48 hours have seen little or nothing in the way of rainfall, but at the same time, the areas that did see rainfall had some pretty substantial amounts. You can see some pretty big totals there in the area very close to the Mississippi River, right around the St. Louis area. Also, some pretty big rains in the northeastern Corn Belt. Note those bigger rainfall totals in northern Ohio and eastern portions of Michigan. So where it did rain, the rains were heavier than I would have thought, but at the same time, I would consider rainfall coverage over the last 48 hours in the Corn Belt to be less than expected. There's looking at 1 week radar estimated precipitation through early on this Sunday, trying to get a gauge on exactly the areas that were able to get field work done during this past week. And you can see from this map that basically nowhere in the Corn Belt was it a clean sweep, that they saw field work getting done on a widespread basis on every day during this past week. And of course, there were areas that were extremely wet. One area in the northwestern Corn Belt, then another area in southeastern Nebraska and areas to the east of there where also all of that rain fell during this last week, and those areas are probably still pretty wet here even early on this Sunday. Let's look at a situation, though, more in the near term to maybe get us a gauge on some places that may be able to have seen enough dry weather in recent days that maybe some places are starting to venture out into the fields once again. Let's kind of draw a line in this map to kind of demarcate a couple of areas. I would think that to the right of that line that I just drew, I would think that even here on this Sunday, any field work is going to be pretty limited in nature, with most spots probably not getting anything done at all. There's maybe a few pockets that a little bit is getting done. You can see one spot there to the west of Fort Wayne where it's been pretty dry, and maybe another small pocket to the west of Indianapolis. But overall, to the right of that line, I think that enough rain has fallen in recent days, and that overall that area has been wet enough in recent weeks that I think that to the right of that line that I drew, there's very little, if any, fieldwork activity getting done even here on this Sunday. Now, to the left of that line, though, you can see that rainfall has not been all that big over the last 4 days. There have been some spotty areas that have seen some big amounts. You can see there that in northwestern Iowa and southwestern Minnesota there have been some substantial rains. But to the left of that line, I think that conditions have been dry enough the last 4 days, and the temperatures have been warm enough the last 4 days that they're probably starting to get a little bit more in the way of fieldwork activities done there. And of course, when you're looking at northern portions of South Dakota and areas to the north of there in northern Minnesota and North Dakota, that's an area where I think that there's all sorts of fieldwork activity getting done right now as that area is seeing an extended period of dry and very warm weather. Keep in mind that for all of the Corn Belt, again, we are looking at another couple of days of dry weather for today and tomorrow, and rainfall overall, even on Tuesday, remaining pretty spotty. So places that are getting field work done right now are probably going to continue to see some more field work getting done for another 2 to 3 days. And with another 2 to 3 days of mostly dry weather, we may be seeing a few other areas starting to venture into the fields as well as things start to dry out just a bit. The early morning radar loop on this Sunday again shows that we are looking at another couple or even 3 days of limited rainfall in the Corn Belt. Anything significant in nature right now just in far southern portions of the southern plains. Temperatures the last couple of days have been pretty nice, warm, certainly no big cold weather anywhere in the middle of the nation during the last couple of days. In the Corn Belt, lots of 70s and 80s for highs. Mid-South and Southeast seeing lots of 80s and 90s, and the departure from normal afternoon highs the last couple of days again illustrates that big cold has not been seen in the middle of the country. Most places running a few degrees above normal during the last couple of days on average. As far as your forecast is concerned, again, it is going to be that Interstate 80 area that is going to be the demarcation between very limited rainfall to the north of Interstate 80 during the next week and quite a bit of rainfall to the south of there. And if I'm going to draw it on this map, there's the demarcation line. Interstate 80 runs from about Omaha to Des Moines to the Quad Cities to Chicago to Cleveland. So again, it is going to be to the south of Interstate 80 when we're going to be starting to see rainfall on the increase again, especially for Tuesday night, and then those areas are going to be having basically a daily threat of rainfall for the Wednesday through Saturday time frame of this week. So about a 4.5 day period in which that area is going to be seeing a constant or daily threat of widespread shower and thunder shower activity. The rainfall on a given day never especially heavy, but just the longevity of the rainfall threat means that the area between Interstate 80 and Interstate 70 is going to be seeing a lot of 1 to 2 inch rainfall amounts. And then if you're looking at the area to the south of Interstate 70, Interstate 70 runs from about Kansas City to St. Louis to Indianapolis to Columbus. To the south of that line, that's where your even bigger rainfall totals are going to be seen in the Corn Belt and into the Mid-South and portion of the Southeast. That's going to be an area seeing a lot of 2 to 3 inch rainfall amounts and locally even heavier than that, especially for about the Wednesday through Saturday time frame of this week. What's going to be bringing about all of this rainfall to the south of Interstate 80 and the lack of rainfall to the north of there? Well, here's a 500 millibar forecast for late in the day on Wednesday to give you a pretty good illustration. It's all going to be, the rainfall is all going to be associated with an upper level low pressure system that is going to be located at that time in the southern plains, and the rainfall is going to be all directed to the east of that low as it drifts to the east and northeast for later on during the work week period. To the north of that low, though, you can see above normal heights across a lot of the northern plains and into the northern Corn Belt, and that upper level ridge of high pressure is going to be protecting those areas from most of the rain that is going to be seen for the middle and latter portions of this work week period. Getting out later into the time frame for 7 o'clock in the evening on Friday, our upper level low has just moved very slowly, just a few hundred miles to the east over that 48-hour period, and is still in a very good position at that time to be bringing all sorts of rainfall to the southeastern Corn Belt and getting into the mid-south and southeast at that time. But note that for the northern plains and into the northern Corn Belt, especially to the areas north of Interstate 80, still lots of high pressure aloft, upper level ridging, still protecting that area from rainfall at that time. So we're looking at rainfall forecast for Wednesday through the weekend. That is when I think that the biggest rains are going to be falling, especially to the south of Interstate 80. You can see there that on the European operational model on the bottom left that it does have fairly significant rains in the Corn Belt to the north of Interstate 80. I'm really kind of disregarding that forecast this morning. You can note here on the bottom right that it's really not supported by the European ensemble. But from the ensembles and from the GFS operational model, you can all see that they're in pretty good agreement that that again, it is going to be areas to the south of Interstate 80 that see the bulk of the rainfall during this time frame, and you can see there that in that area, significant or even heavy rainfall totals, never heavy on just a one given day, but the longevity of the rainfall threat means that we are eventually going to be totaling some pretty substantial rainfall totals or even heavy totals in that area for the duration of the 5-day period in question. What do we have longer term? Well, in the week 2 time frame, it's again kind of a similar situation with what I've been talking about for the last couple of weeks. A situation where the forecast is not completely dry, but at the same time it's not going to be incredibly wet. We just have to really get close to the time frame in question before we really can look at the rainfall forecast details. 500 millibar forecast from the GFS ensemble on the left, the European ensemble on the right. Nice agreement among these two ensembles at that time. You can see that instead of the trough west ridge east weather pattern that dominated the weather pattern in the nation for the month of May, instead we have this ridge in the east and trough in the west weather pattern, again indicated with nice agreement from both models at that time. We are looking at a lot of warmth in a big portion of the nation over the next week, but then we are looking at some cooler temperatures for the week 2 time frame. You can see with that trough of low pressure bringing down some cooler air from Canada at that time. You can see why the forecast for the week 2 time frame is going to be featuring some below normal rainfall into the middle of the country. And again, that's not an exceptionally wet weather pattern, but it's not completely dry either. You can see that both the European ensemble and the GFS ensemble are still suggesting that the main storm track is going to be flowing directly over the Corn Belt. So still not a dry weather pattern at that time, but something we have to get closer to determine exactly how dry or how wet it is going to be. Even for the very end of the 11 to 15 day period, looking at all of the ensembles here at this time, again, it's not a weather pattern that features a lot of amplitude. There's no big ridges or big troughs anywhere on any of these weather maps, but at the same time, you can see that the storm track is still flowing directly over the Corn Belt, so it would still definitely feature a weather pattern featuring additional rainfall chances at that time. Just again, have to get closer to the time frame in question to determine exactly how wet or how dry it is going to be. Some international weather for your Sunday. It's still not a good situation for the winter grain and summer row crop areas of the former Soviet Union that I have circled on this map. They are still looking at subnormal rainfall there for the duration of the 2-week time frame. A lot of the rain that is shown there, mainly in Ukraine, is actually going to be falling during the 1 to 5 day time frame. Temperatures are going to be running above and much above normal. We have seen some 90s in portion of that circled area during the last couple of days. We'll continue to see some 90s on a daily basis, probably for the duration of the 2-week time frame. Probably going to be a few days though when the 90 plus degree high temperatures are going to be pretty spotty in nature. In Europe, looking at mostly normal rainfall there over the next 2 weeks. You can see there that your wettest areas with respect to normal in France and England, some of that rainfall getting started in those areas by the middle of this coming week. For the spring grain areas of the former Soviet Union, which is the area that I have circled on this map, looking at substantial or even heavy rains there during the duration of the next 10 days. Some of the rain in question falling during both the 1 to 5 and 6 to 10 day periods. For the North China Plain, that is one area where the forecast has changed versus what I talked about from back on Friday. You can see on this map that for the North China Plain, we're now looking at close to normal rainfall over the next 2 weeks. All of the rainfall in question, though, is going to be during the 1 to 5 day time frame, and the biggest part of that rainfall is going to be falling in southern portions of the North China Plain, generally speaking to the south of that line that I just drew there, where there could be some pretty heavy rainfall totals, especially during the Wednesday, Thursday time frame of this week. So a much wetter 1 to 5 day forecast for the North China Plain before they revert back into subnormal rainfall for the 6 to 10 and 11 to 15 day periods. Your corn and soybean areas of Manchuria still looks like a good forecast there, near normal rainfall for the duration of the 2-week time frame. Another area where the forecast has changed versus back on Friday is in Australia. You can see in this forecast that it's still not overly wet, but you can see that a good portion of the wheat areas of Western Australia and a lot of the wheat areas in more eastern portion of Australia now looking at close to normal rainfall during the next 2 weeks. Some of that rainfall falling during both the week 1 and week 2 time frames. In Canada, a lot of dry weather still going to continue for the Canadian prairies for the 1 to 5 day time frame, but we are going going to be looking at rainfall for the 6 to 10 and 11 to 15 day periods. This is the 10-day rainfall forecast from the European operational model. Most of the rain that I just circled there is going to be during the 6 to 10 day period. That model probably overdoing things, but again, it does illustrate that we are looking at much better chances for what would be some very welcome rains for the Canadian prairies for both the 6 to 10 and 11 to 15 day time frames. Finishing things up here on this Sunday, we're now starting into the monsoon season in India. That is something that will last through September. Not going to get off to a good start though. 2-week rainfall percent of normal in India. Looking at any normal rainfall just in far southwestern portion of the country. The rest of India looking at subnormal rainfall for the next 2 weeks. Some places getting nothing at all. So again, a pretty a substandard start to the Indian monsoon here, at least for the first half of June. That's all I have for your Sunday. Everyone have themselves a great rest of the weekend. We'll talk to you again tomorrow morning.